Hey guys, and welcome to today's video where we are going to be talking about the phenomenon of Instagram face, its effect on our beauty standards and on society more generally. So before we start, make sure you are subscribed down below, notifications on, and don't forget to leave a like on this video if you do go on to enjoy it. I also just want to put a quick disclaimer here. We're going to be talking a lot about cosmetic surgery in this video. I am not against surgery. That is a very individual decision. Please don't take this video to be bashing people who get surgery. If that is the right thing for you, you've researched it, you're 100% sure you want it, you go for it. You know, I'm not going to offer an opinion on someone else's choice to have surgery or not. And I'm also going to be focusing a lot on the female perspective of Instagram face, but there are, of course, also beauty standards for men. Superhero movies where everyone looks like a Greek god with a full head of luscious locks and muscles that you usually only see in real life on statues. Also, if I start looking a little bit sweaty, it's because it is currently very hot here in London. And if any of you Texans come for me saying, oh, it's actually 150 degrees here in Texas, okay, shut up. You have aircon. Your buildings are designed to keep heat out. My flat is designed to absorb heat, and I tell you what, it's doing a fantastic job, which is great when it's -5, but right now it's 30 and it is so hot I feel like I'm losing a pound a minute with the amount of sweat that I am producing, which is probably a little bit TMI, so let's just forget that we said that and move on to the actual video. So before we get into the effects of Instagram face, let's talk about what Instagram face actually is. Surprisingly, this is a phenomenon recognized by Wikipedia. There's an entire page dedicated to it, and that page describes Instagram face as a social trend for women to adjust their features to conform to a single template, either by applying filters to their photographs on social media or via cosmetic surgery. Essentially, Instagram face is the phenomenon whereby a lot of women, particularly on Instagram, look very similar to each other because they have all either surgically or digitally altered their face to exhibit the same perfect features, and in doing so have erased some of their natural features that would make them unique from others. The particular features that make up the classic Instagram face are listed as the person being young with flawless, unwrinkled skin, plump, high cheekbones, cat-like uplifted eyes and long lashes, small, symmetrical nose, and luscious lips with a blank expression. And the face generally is unambiguously racially white, but of ambiguous ethnicity. And makeup artist Colby Smith has also pointed out that the features of Instagram face derive from a number of different ethnicities, those being an overly tan skin tone, a South Asian influence with the brows and the eye shape, an African American influence with the lips, a Caucasian influence with the nose, and a cheek structure that is predominantly Native American and Middle Eastern. And I really like the way that this article described Instagram face because it pointed out that it is essentially a greatest hits playlist of all of the best features from these different races compiled together to make the kind of ultimate universally perfect face. And with the typical Instagram face deriving physical features from so many different ethnicities, it's easy to understand why we call it Instagram face. It doesn't appear anywhere except Instagram. It's incredibly unlikely for one person to naturally have all of these features because they would need heritage coming from all over the world, and they would need to have exactly the right dominant genes from each ethnicity in their heritage in order to achieve Instagram face without any kind of cosmetic procedure. And when you start looking closely at the most followed Instagram face influencers, you'll find that none of them have achieved that look without some kind of cosmetic surgery or digital alterations. There will of course be people out there who do have a natural Instagram face, but they are rare, and the following celebrities who are all known for their Instagram face do not fall into that category. Megan Fox, any of the Kardashian Jenners, Cindy Kimberly, Bella Hadid, Emily Ratajkowski are all renowned for being some of the most beautiful women on the planet, but all of them have had surgeries to bring them closer to the perfect face and have thus made themselves look more similar to each other than they did pre-surgery. In order to really understand the effects of Instagram face on society, I think we need to cycle back to figure out where Instagram face actually came from, because Instagram has only been around since 2010, and this trend has only become a recognizable beauty standard in the past maybe 5 years. But for as long as society has existed, there has been a beauty standard for both men and women, which is an image in the head of each individual of what the most attractive human being on the planet would look like. And these standards have changed throughout history, from the Tudor face, focusing on attaining the palest possible complexion, to the Victorian value of a plump and full-bodied woman, to the androgynous look of the Roaring Twenties, and now to the slim, thick hourglass of Western society in the 2010s and 2020s. The beauty standard is always evolving, and it cycles through trends of what is or is not attractive. And in recent decades, the 80s was all about the supermodel chic. The ideal female figure was tall, toned, and athletic looking. The 90s then brought in heroin chic, where every aspect of the body was expected to be as skinny as possible, with very little in the way of curves, to now where the hourglass figure is back in fashion thanks to the likes of the Kardashians, who popularized having exaggerated curves whilst maintaining a slim physique in every other aspect of the body. However, whilst body standards have always existed, the beauty standard for faces has been less prominent until now. There hasn't been a universal expectation of what a face will look like until more modern times. There was, of course, the very widely desired ski slope nose of the 60s and 70s that many women, particularly those in Hollywood, had rhinoplasties to achieve, but facial features have not been at the forefront of beauty standards before in the way that they have been in the last 30 years. Generally, the parts of the face that would normally follow trends would be things like eyebrows, which could be grown out or shaved down and shaped into whatever was trendy. But nowadays, we're seeing particular bone structures become trends in the form of Instagram face. The high cheekbones, the button nose that we talked about earlier are perfect examples of this, which you can't just shave them off easily and reshape them how you want to. And the first that we saw of the new kind of filled in Instagram face looks was in the late 2000s, actually, before Instagram became a thing, with this article from Jonathan Van Meter in 2008 discussing at the time the new trend of women wanting to plump up their faces to give themselves a more baby-faced or doll-like appearance, citing Madonna, Angelina Jolie, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Demi Moore as the main influences on this trend. And plastic surgery was quite taboo at this time. A lot of celebrities who had it wouldn't talk about it openly, and there weren't as many procedures available as there are now. But this was seemingly the first time that a lot of famous women were getting surgeries done with the aim of the same end look of a doll-like face with the wide eyes and the plush lips. And the 80s supermodel and the 90s heroin chic body standards had resulted in a very intense exercise culture that extended into the early 2000s, which, along with the perfectly sculpted bodies it gave women, also came with a side of gauntness. Extreme weight loss would hollow out the face, so that while the aging process was slowed in the body, it showed a lot more in the face. So hence why women started to want to fill in these hollowed out areas to give themselves a fresher, younger appearance in their faces as well as in their bodies. And I think this was really the beginning of Instagram face, where people started to realize that through surgical enhancements, they could have both the perfect face and the perfect body. And that was massively accelerated when the Kardashians burst onto the scene in the late 2000s and the early 2010s. Kim Kardashian is the poster girl for current beauty standards. She has always been curvy, but she's always had a tiny waist, a flat stomach, and narrow shoulders, along with a perfectly contoured and sculpted face. And as the Kardashians have gained popularity, so did their unique look, which then became not so unique as more people copied it through the use of plastic surgery and editing. Around 2017 to 2018 was where people started to notice that a lot of Kylie Jenner's friends were starting to look exactly like her. Instagram models like Cindy Kimberly and Anastasia Karinakalu, I probably absolutely butchered that, but they were beginning to share a lot of facial features with Kylie, such as their nose, their lips, their face shape. And in the past 5 years or so, that's gone from being confined to Kylie's inner circle of friends to being a trend amongst a lot of social media's influencers and personalities. And as more people started to copy the features that were originally staples of the Kardashians, these features morphed into becoming more normalized and therefore became ingrained into the beauty standards for ordinary women. And one huge differentiator, however, between when this trend began in the late 2000s and now is that the target audience of people wanting to achieve this look has gotten a lot younger. In the article that I referenced, it talks about the procedures mainly being done on women in their late 30s and early 40s wanting to look younger, whereas now people as young as 14 are going under the knife in the hopes of achieving a more beautiful face because they want to spend as little time as possible not being conventionally beautiful, rather than just wanting to reverse the aging process that happens to everyone's face naturally once that process started to become noticeable. And I really hate that beauty standards cycle like fashion trends. Surgeries like the Tinkerbell tip nose and buccal fat removal are trendy right now, but in a year's time, people will find a different type of cosmetic procedure to popularize, and it's so sad that particular faces go in and out of season the same way that low-rise jeans do. And the popularization and increased accessibility of cosmetic surgery has definitely sped up these beauty cycles, because 20 years ago, people did not talk openly about getting surgery. Dermal fillers were not really a thing, and the only surgery that a lot of celebs would have would be Botox. Botox wasn't actually approved for use in the US by the FDA until 2002, and fillers a few years after that, which explains why this kind of filled-in look didn't become popular until the 2010s, once famous people started to trust and get those procedures. Nowadays, information on cosmetic surgery is very widely available, and there are Instagram accounts that break down all the cosmetic procedures that particular celebrities or influencers are likely to have had, which is obviously intended to be a don't believe everything you see on social media message, but could inadvertently teach people exactly which surgeries they need to get in order to achieve that look that their favorite celebrity has. And there's been a 200% increase in the number of minimally invasive cosmetics procedures performed each year since the year 2000, which would be things like fillers, Botox, fat dissolving injections, etc., as these procedures were not really popular in the 2000s or early 2010s and only really started to take off once Kylie Jenner admitted to having lip filler. And in 2021, the dermal filler market was valued at $3.07 billion, but it's projected to be worth more than double that at $6.28 billion by 2028, which shows just how fast the popularity of these procedures is growing, because they are more widely advertised and more ordinary people have started to invest in them because they are more affordable than invasive procedures, to the point where in 8 years, the value of the industry will double. And having a beauty standard that is realistically only achievable through surgery is, in a word, classist. It's only accessible to those who are able to pay hundreds or even thousands of pounds to alter their natural features via surgery, because it doesn't matter how many runs you go on, you cannot alter the length of your chin or the shape of your nose or the height of your eyebrows using diet or exercise. Gia Tolentino, in her article about Instagram face from 2019, made a fantastic comparison that people who are born with assets, either natural or capital assets, can afford to look at their body and their face the same way that a CEO would look at a business. They identify the underperforming areas and they fix them. They discard any assets that don't make profit and they refocus the business towards the ones that do. People who are born into wealth can afford to closely analyze their face and fix the imperfections in order to bring themselves closer to perfection. Procedures like rhinoplasties are very expensive and the risk to reward ratio is high. It costs around £7,000 to £10,000 to have it done in the US or the UK, or £2,000 to £5,000 to have it done in Turkey. But it's a permanent procedure. It takes multiple years to see the final result, and if something goes wrong or you don't like the final result, then it costs even more to go back and have it fixed. And facelifts cost around $8,000 in the US, but wealthy people will pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for the best facelift that money can buy, which is something that working class people could not even imagine doing. Most people do not have multiple thousands of pounds or dollars just lying around to spend on a surgery, so the trendy straight nose with the cute little Tinkerbell tip or the cat eye thread lift is restricted to those who are either blessed with it naturally or are from wealthy backgrounds and can afford to go and get those procedures done. And pretty privilege, it's a thing. People who are perceived to be conventionally attractive have an easier ride in life. And now, because of the classism involved in achieving the perfect face according to modern beauty standards, pretty privilege is even more pronounced, because people who are from poorer backgrounds are less likely to benefit from that privilege because they cannot afford the procedures that the wealthy can in order to fit into that standard, which naturally is very unlikely to be achieved without any alterations. And it's not even just about the cost of a procedure. There's potentially serious medical side effects to anything that you get done, and invasive procedures like rhinoplasties have a very long recovery time, which if you are from a poorer background further limits your ability to get that done, because saving all of your pennies to pay for it doesn't account for potentially having to pay for a revision and for taking multiple weeks off of work just to recover from having the surgery done. Hence the popularization of the phrase, you're not ugly, you're just poor. Because the most recognizable Instagram face models like Kylie Jenner and Bella Hadid, etc., came from rich families who could afford to pay for them to have cosmetic procedures from a very young age, so they would grow into being the perfect woman when they reached their 20s. You know, Bella Hadid had her nose job at 14, Kylie Jenner had lip fillers at 16, before their facial features had even finished developing, so that now they're in their mid-20s, they've fully recovered from those procedures, and people know them for the faces they've got now, rather than the faces they had as teenagers. So some people might not even be aware that they had work done. And people who are wealthy can afford to change their face at will, as and when the trendy look changes, whereas those who are less wealthy are either stuck with what their genetics gave them, or can only afford to have 1 or 2 procedures, so they have to stick with whatever they choose, and may end up with an outdated look once the trends change and they can't afford to have whatever they've done revised. There's also definitely a patriarchal influence in how beauty standards are created, and there always has been. You know, back in the day, it was mostly men working as editors for magazines, photoshopping women's bodies and faces to make them look more attractive on the covers, and now it's plastic surgeons who have the control over editing women's faces to make them better looking. 85% of plastic surgeons are male, and yet 92% of patients who get cosmetic surgery are female. Even at Meta, the company that owns Instagram and Facebook and also owns all the filters that perpetrate Instagram face, 77% of their employees are male, and therefore the male gaze and what men think makes women more attractive will play into what features those filters enhance or highlight. And when it comes to surgery, by virtue of their position, the patient will naturally trust the surgeon to guide them as to which procedures are best for them. For example, you might go into a consultation thinking that you want jaw filler, but actually the surgeon persuades you that chin filler would enhance your features better and make you more attractive. If this is a male surgeon working on a female patient, which the majority of the time it is, there will likely be some unconscious bias that plays into the recommendations that the surgeon makes, whereby they will recommend to you the procedure that they think would make you more attractive to them. Cosmetic enhancements are all about making yourself more attractive, so it's almost inevitable that the surgeon's opinion on what makes a person attractive or unattractive will influence the guidance that they give you and the procedures that they are willing to perform on you and what your end results are going to look like. However, a by-effect of surgeons performing procedures that are designed to bring you closer to the universal beauty standard is that when people have those procedures done, they lose little bits of individuality as their face becomes less unique and more like the face that you see 100 times every time you log into Instagram. I mentioned in a previous video about the devaluation of celebrity status that we aren't really seeing breakout stars like Jennifer Aniston, Anne Hathaway, Adam Sandler, etc. rising through the ranks at the moment, partly due to how we consume and film and TV, which I am thinking of doing like a whole video on, so let me know if you want to see that, but also partly because everyone who is considered particularly beautiful kind of looks the same. So no one is standing out to become that huge of a star because, as we know, Hollywood places huge emphasis on people needing to be attractive in order to be successful. Jennifer Aniston, at the time of starring in Friends from 1994 to 2004, was seen as one of the most beautiful women in the world, and she is absolutely stunning, but she does not have an Instagram face. You know, she has had surgery. She's been open about having a nose job in her 20s to fix a deviated septum, and she's most likely had Botox in recent years. But when she first appeared on TV, she was unique. She didn't look like anyone else, and that's why the world became obsessed with her. And a glittering example of how hard it can be to strike the balance between celebrating unique features and complying with the beauty standard is Jennifer Grey, who starred as Baby in the cult classic Dirty Dancing in 1987. She was recognised around the world as a star because of that film, and a standout feature that people knew her for was her nose, which was larger than average. It was not the cute little button nose, but she was still gorgeous, and that was the feature that made her more unique and more recognisable. However, due to pressure from her mother, she got a nose job at the height of her career in the 1990s because she felt like her appearance, particularly her nose, would hold her back from getting more roles because she wasn't complying with conventional beauty standards. However, the nose job did the opposite of what she wanted it to. She ended up getting a more drastic change than she'd expected because she had to go in for a revision because there was irregularity caused by the first procedure. And this change actually kind of ruined her career because she became unrecognizable and she lost her celebrity status as a result. Her natural face was very recognisable because she had that standout feature, and the change that her nose jobs made was to take away that individuality, so she blended in with everyone else, and she lost a lot of opportunities because of that. Celebrity status is built upon people recognising you, so when they don't recognise you anymore, the leg up that your previous catalogue of films should give you no longer happens, and you have to start from square one again. And Jennifer Grey's story is honestly really sad because she only got the procedure in the first place due to pressure from her family and the thought that her career was going to go downhill if she didn't. But actually, having it was what sent her career downhill because she became just another face in the crowd rather than the unique and recognisable Hollywood star Jennifer Grey that she was before then. And her surgery was very publicised and it was very widely talked about in magazines, mostly negatively, and I think this is a perfect example of why we aren't seeing breakout stars right now. Directors aren't casting people in leading roles if they don't comply with beauty standards, but if they do comply, then they become just another pretty face. It's why there's about 6 famous actresses who all look exactly like Margot Robbie and are pretty much impossible to tell apart when you put them side by side. Margot was a breakout star, so directors started to pay more attention to actresses who looked like her, but it's harder for those actresses to make a name for themselves because people will see them and be like, oh, that's the girl who looks like Margot Robbie. They are all very talented in their own rights, but they are remembered for being a Margot Robbie lookalike rather than for being themselves, with the exception of Emma Mackey, who I think has managed through the use of hair colours to separate herself from Margot despite them looking very similar. And it's a weird duality at the moment of society generally getting prettier and beauty standards getting higher, and yet that particular type of aesthetic prettiness is getting bland because there's no uniqueness to it once more than one person has the same face. And I would describe it as a sort of beauty inflation, where Instagram face and the prominence of it online has changed our perception of attractiveness so that we find fewer of the people we see in real life to be attractive because the standard that social media has set is so impossibly high, yet so rare to see outside of social media. When talking about things like Instagram, there's always the topic of body dysmorphia brought up, whereby our perception of ourselves changes and we lose the ability to look at ourselves objectively. Often we believe ourselves to be fatter or uglier than we actually are because the girls on Instagram are so impossibly perfect. And because once you change your appearance with fillers, your brain gets used to the new appearance and you forget about the old one, which triggers a dissatisfaction because we miss the feeling of looking at ourselves and seeing the newly pronounced features straight after having the procedure. However, even with the prevalent conversation around body dysmorphia, I don't think we talk enough about this beauty inflation, whereby when beauty comes from filters and cosmetic enhancements and is seen as the expectation rather than the exception, our natural beauty starts to seem less valuable or less attractive because we have this one universal standard that we see all over Instagram that we expect beautiful people to comply with. Social media has made us a more visual society. We care about looks more now because looks are what generate likes and likes are what boost our self-esteem. But Instagram face and online beauty has desensitized us to the beauty that comes from having unique features from other people and from being a good person. And social media itself is partly to blame for this because of the way that the algorithm works to reward things that are popular. There are particular photos that many different influencers will post that all look pretty much the same because Instagram rewards photos that are perceived to be particularly aesthetic. So for example, the mirror selfie with an all white or beige room in the background, the photo outside a gorgeous house in Kensington, the milkmaid dress against a backdrop of a sunset in a field. Lots of people post these types of photos because Instagram's algorithm rewards them, and as such our feeds become monotone and flooded with the same picture. The same happens with faces. Instagram's algorithm will detect which faces people respond to positively and will put those faces into more people's feeds or explore pages, and as such, more people begin to desire that face as it becomes widely shared and will alter their own face to try and replicate that popular look and emulate that same success on Instagram for themselves. And it's kind of terrifying that technology is essentially shaping people into whatever will get the most likes and engagement. You know, algorithms should not have that much influence over people's appearances, but unfortunately that is just the world that we live in right now. And I don't think that this would be the case if we weren't so acutely aware of how much money there is to be made from being successful on social media. It's the same reason people will spend thousands of pounds on cosmetic enhancements before going on Love Island, because they want to look their best and get picked by people in the villa. because the longer they last in there and the more attractive the public perceives them to be, the more followers and the more brand deals they will have waiting for them when they leave the show. However, because Instagram is controlled by an algorithm which promotes the most perfect faces, it doesn't account for the amount of editing and Photoshop that goes into making those faces perfect when it's pushing that standard out to the general audience. In some cases, you can tell when the face on the screen isn't real. Kristen Hancher, for example, is infamous for posting hugely edited photos to the point where the face in the picture looks more like it was created by AI than by human genetics. But in a lot of cases with mild editing, the person's face looks just real enough that it feels achievable. Hence why so many people are going to surgeons with reference photos of people like Kim Kardashian and hoping that when they leave the clinic, they will look just like her. However, it's important to remember that no Instagram model or celebrity is posting unedited photos on Instagram. Kylie Jenner, the poster girl of Instagram face, doesn't even look like Kylie Jenner. It's so easy to tell the difference between paparazzi photos that she's paid for versus paparazzi photos that were taken by actual paparazzi, because the ones that she pays for are edited to make her look like how she looks on Instagram, whereas the real pap photos show what she actually looks like. Kylie is a gorgeous woman, but her features in real life are not the same as her features on Instagram. Now, I'm no expert in surgery or facial analysis, but you can see by looking at these side-by-side comparisons that her eyes are slightly bigger. She has lines underneath her eyes where they're set into her face. Her chin is rounder, her jaw is less defined, she has some faint laugh lines, and her lips are a bit more obviously filled in the non-paid-for photos as opposed to what she pays for and posts. And these are not ugly features. Kylie is beautiful either way, but she photoshops out these very natural features on her face to make herself seem more perfect. And that's what gives her the unrealistic Instagram face, because in real life, no one is without a single line or blemish on their face. However, she's under immense pressure to be perfect online because developments in technology in combination with social media have made us an increasingly visual society. We have constant access to high-definition cameras and screens via our phones. All of our entertainment content is filmed and photographed in 4K, which has the capability now to capture any kind of imperfection, and the most widely used apps like YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram focus on visual content. The need to look good on these platforms using high-definition technologies has led to a lot more considered posting, where people will only upload photos to Instagram when they've smoothed out their skin and they've posed in a flattering way and they've stood in a spot with good lighting, contoured their face, etc. And filters provide us with some of those things and make it easy to take an Insta-worthy photo, because things like makeup and lighting are less important when the filter will put those on for you. And so filters have become hugely popular, especially on TikTok. In the 2010s, people would combat accusations of using Photoshop or filters by posting videos of themselves, but now TikTok has hugely advanced the video capability of filters. Back in 2016, it was pretty fucking obvious when someone had a Snapchat filter on because no one is born with a huge flower crown on their head. But now, TikTok's filters are often so subtle that the average viewer would not recognize that someone is using them unless the filter icon is shown on the video. I even saw a TikTok the other day of a girl saying that TikTok had automatically added a skin filter on her video when she was filming it without notifying her that the filter was on. And she only realized when she watched it back and she was like, that's not what my face looks like. And back in the 90s and the 2000s, girls were warned not to compare themselves to what they see in magazines because those photos were airbrushed, whereas nowadays everyone has access to those airbrushing tools. So that's just what we think we're supposed to look like because that's what everyone looks like on social media. A lot of times the features that filters bestow upon you are not realistically achievable, but that does not stop people from going into surgeons' clinics with a reference photo of themselves with a filter on where, as an untrained person, they can't even identify the specific procedures that would enable them to achieve that look, so they're asking the surgeon to do that for them and then just give them those procedures. To use myself as an example, I haven't done this, I haven't been into a surgery with a picture of myself with a filter, but I wanted to give you an example of how unrealistic a filter is. So I took this photo in 2021 using a filter on Instagram. Now, I rarely use filters for my photos because honestly, I just can't be bothered finding one that looks good, and most of the time I am happy with my photo without one, hence why I had to find a reference photo from 2 years ago. But on this occasion, I had to scroll through and I found this filter which made me look like a very much hotter version of myself. And this is a photo of me, but it doesn't look like me. And here is a photo of me from the same day, taken literally directly after the photo with the filter. And these two photographs don't look like the same person. And if the makeup and the outfit was not the same, a stranger might not even be able to identify that both of these photos are of me. And I then decided that for experimental purposes, I would use an editing app to see if I could achieve the same look as the filter. And this is the result of that. So you've got the filter photo, the natural photo, and then the photo that has the filter features edited. So I made my nose smaller, I made it more snatched, I made my eyes more almond shaped, my chin longer, and my lips bigger. But I still don't look exactly like I did with the filter on. So if I turned up at a cosmetic surgeon's and asked them to make my face look like that filter, I would be vastly disappointed, because that look just is not realistic for my facial features, despite what that filter might tell me. And it's also worth noting that the app that I used to do the editing was free, and it took literally all of 2 minutes to make those changes. So it's incredibly scary to think of how easily accessible these tools are to young girls and women who are insecure about their body or their face, because you could so easily develop body dysmorphia from overuse of these apps, because the differences between the real photo and the edited one are quite subtle, to the point where if I posted this, I'm pretty sure only people who are like my close friends and family who regularly see me would recognize that the photo has been edited. That's what you need to always bear in mind when you look at an influencer's photos. It's so easy to believe that because they look the same in all of their photos, that is just what they look like, but a lot of the times it's not. And we don't see them in real life unedited photos enough to recognize where their posts on Instagram are not reflective of their true appearance. And that's why Instagram face is able to become so prominent, because people are only posting photos on Instagram and they're not huge celebrities getting photographed on red carpets all the time, which shows their real face. And one thing I find so weird is that we are in an age right now where a lot of people and media outlets shout about body positivity and self-acceptance, and yet the beauty standard and expectation has never been higher than it is right now. Because before social media, whilst the standard was unrealistic, it wasn't entirely unattainable the way it is now, because now the standard comes from digital editing and cosmetic surgery rather than from real people who just happen to be extremely beautiful. And the current standard also has an element of ageism to it. You know, any signs of ageism are quickly covered up by surgery or filters, be it laugh lines, forehead wrinkles, droopy skin, and girls as young as 18 are going in for anti-wrinkle injections because they are so afraid of natural aging and becoming ugly. And a great quote that I heard from a video that I used as a reference, which all the stuff that I use to reference is going to be in the description, is that aging is a privilege that not everyone has. You can't be in your mid-20s forever. And I know that hearing that from someone who's literally 21 and in their prime right now is probably not too inspiring, but I honestly think that the earlier on you embrace the fact that you will age, you're not going to look like how you did at 18 forever, the happier you're going to be. And I've seen TikToks talking about the kind of second puberty that women go through in their mid-20s that a lot of people just aren't even aware of. When your metabolism slows down, your body changes maybe even more than it did when you went through puberty as a teenager, which if people don't know about that and they don't expect it to happen, that could be really damaging to their self-esteem in an age where women in their 20s are expected to look like Bella Hadid or Kylie Jenner. And there's often conversations praising celebrities like Paul Rudd and Anne Hathaway who never seem to age, but we forget that even if they're not getting filler or invasive surgery, these rich and famous people have access to the best dermatologists, trainers, nutritionists, facialists, etc. in the world to help them maintain their youthful look through things like diet, skincare, and minor non-invasive procedures like skin resurfacing or laser treatments. If we all had access to that, we would all be able to avoid the visual effects of aging as well as they do. And I think many people assumed that Instagram face is merely a fad or a trend, and eventually people will stop wanting to have those particular features that are trendy right now. But beauty standards often don't entirely go away and flip, but they just build on the previous standards. For example, in the 40s, it was a bit of a fad for women to shave their legs, and a lot of people jumped on the trend and that's what made it normal. But now it's seen as a basic expectation rather than just the norm. And if a woman chooses not to shave her legs and put them on show, it's seen as a move of radical feminism. And I don't think that Instagram face will ever die out. We will most likely just change the type of looks that filters and surgery are looking to achieve, flipping between the clearly unnatural and the subtle procedures that are meant to be noticed only by the trained eye. And one thing that is very commonly misunderstood is the widespread belief that filler disappears after 6 to 24 months. It just gets broken down by the body and flushed out of your system. That's not the case. Filler remains within your body even after it naturally dissolves and the filled in look disappears. So the longer that a person continues to get filler topped up, the more of that dissolved filler will be present in their body. And that is what leads to people who've had a lot of filler over the years looking somewhat bloated and not completely natural even after their filler dissolves, because the dissolved filler has to go somewhere. So the more that gets pumped on top of it, the more obvious the dissolved filler is going to be. And currently we're in a trend cycle of subtle but natural looking features, even though the features are not natural in any way, shape or form. But I'm sure we're only a few months away from whatever the next trendy procedure is going to be, whether it be fat dissolving in a particular area or overfilling in a particular area. Instagram face is not going to go anywhere for as long as the audience continues to reward those faces on social media with likes and engagement, and internalize those faces as the beauty standard expected of everyday women, despite the occurrence of Instagram face in everyday life being like seeing the Northern Lights in the UK. It's extremely rare. It doesn't look as great in person as it does in pictures, but we're all still going to be in awe of it anyway. I don't really know if that metaphor made sense. Maybe I'm just pissed still that when I saw the Northern Lights in Norway, they did not look half as impressive as they do in pictures, which I now know have massively upped exposure to make them look neon, as opposed to the just kind of, you know, you can see them, but they're not like, wow, they're there. But either way, that's my killer statement to end the video on. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, leave a comment with any thoughts you might have, and subscribe to see more videos like this. Also, apologies if this video is late, which I think it probably will be. My project management skills are in the gutter right now. I sat down to make this script thinking it was going to be a 20-minute job, despite the fact that, like, when was the last time I made a 20-minute video? Like months and months ago. I promise I'm going to try and be realistic next time, but you know, let's be honest, it's probably not going to happen. Whilst you're waiting for the next video that will inevitably be late as usual, I will leave some of my other videos in the description for you to keep yourself entertained. But other than that, I will hopefully see you all in my next one. Bye guys.